that, guys. Firstly, I'd like to wish everybody a very happy Easter. Whatever you're doing with your friends or family, that you have an absolute blast. As you can see, I'm at home. I'm not fishing this weekend. I know it's going to be like a circus out there, so I tend to steer clear a little bit. Over the last few days, and I do apologise that I haven't been able to do anything up until now, but I've had a few questions in regards to fishing in weed and how I would go about it. Personally, I'm going to pass on just a few tips that will make your life a lot easier when you're faced with fishing in heavy weed, and I hope it helps. I really do. Most people get scared when they're faced with fishing in heavy weed, and I understand. I've been in that situation many years ago when I fished lakes that were very weedy, and you have to uh, adapt your approach differently when you're fishing in heavy weed. So, firstly, the first tip I'm going to get, you need to find out on how far that weed is coming up off the bottom. And normally you use that just with a bare lead. Don't use a prong lead. That'll give you a world of pain. So just a dumpy bare lead, maybe 3 ounces, whatever it would be. I tend to use between 2 and 3 ounces. Um, and you can normally tell on how deep that weed is by the descent. You normally know whether it's 6 foot off the bottom, 3 foot off of the bottom, or only half a foot off the bottom. You can normally tell. The shallower the weed, or should I say, the height of the weed off the bottom, um, you normally can feel. You normally get a drop. You can feel the drop, so you know that the weed is not that bad. Normally, if you don't feel a drop, you're in heavy weed, but you can normally tell how deep it is. So that's what I do. Um, I then move over to bait. People say, well, what about rigs? But I'll get on to rigs in a minute. I tend to move over to bait. I tend to use small items of food. So small pellets, particles, hemp, groats. I tend to use quite a lot, flake maize, um, snot boilies, crumb boilie, because you want that bait sort of hovering in the levels of the weed. You don't want them sinking straight the way through. I've seen people baiting up with 18s and 20 mil boilies in heavy weed, and they wonder why they haven't had a take. Well, the bait's just fallen through the weed. The fish are certainly not going to find it. They're not going to see it or anything like that. So you're wasting your time. So small items of food, so it sort of hangs in the layers of the weed. It's very visual. I also add hemp oil, salmon oil as well, and you normally know when there's something grubbing around because you get a lovely flat spot, and that's a great indicator to tell you what is actually going on out there. Thirdly, rigs. Now, everything changed for me some years ago when I stumbled across the chod rig. It changed my fishing. I was ready to give up at some point because I just couldn't get my head around it, and that's the thing with fishing in the weeds. Some people just can't get their head around it. We're so used to fishing, sort of the clear fisheries, the clay bottoms, etc. But when we're faced with something different, especially an old mere or something like that, that's not commercial, you have to change your approach. So when I stumbled across the chod rig, as I said, it changed my fishing. And also now the Ronnie rig. Everybody knows about the Ronnie rig. If you don't, where have you been? I use the Ronnie rig an awful lot, and the simple reason is, and it's not because everybody else is using it. Years ago, it went on the Hush Hush. It was called the QC rig. Um, Before, obviously, it sort of blew out, and everybody found out about it, and obviously the name was changed somewhat to the Ronnie rig or the spinner rig. It's an extremely efficient hooker of fish, and that's why a lot of people do use it. You want to be looking, you don't want to be using braided hook links or anything like that. You want to be using stiff material, so fluorocarbons. The Boom by Cord is very good, which is what I tend to use on a lead core leader, if rules allow, of course. If not, then you can buy a tubing kit now. for the helicopter setup. So those are the two rigs I would use: chod rig or the Ronnie rig. Don't be using a leg clip. That's a definite no-no, especially when you're fishing in heavy weeds. You don't want to be anything like that. Fourthly, we're getting on something that's a little bit controversial, and that is dropping the lead. Now, I've read some real stories, people saying, oh, well, you've got to feel for a drop, and when you do, it's not going to be the bottom, it's going to be hundreds and thousands of leads that you're feeling when you're skating the lead across. I understand why people don't like losing leads. It's not good practice, to be fair, and I only drop a lead if I really have to. But when you're fishing in heavy weed, you have got to get rid of that lead. You've got to eject it as soon as you possibly can. It'll give you a world of pain if you don't, and 9 times out of 10, you won't land anything that you hook. And let's face it, when you go fishing, you want to land everything that you hook. If you leave the lead on, I guarantee you're not going to land it. It's just going to give you a world of pain. Number 5 is setting up your clutch correctly, or your bait runner correctly. You don't want it free running. You really don't. You want to fish it locked up if you can. Sometimes that's not always possible, but if it was me, you try and fish it locked up. There's enough stretching the line anyway, but you don't want to be giving them fish an inch. And this is where we come to dropping the lead. 9 times out of 10, when the fish pick up the bait and it gets hooked, it'll shake its head, the lead will come away, but the fish can't run as it normally would and get into another weed bed. We've all been in situations where you've hooked the fish, and even with the stretch of the line, sometimes it can get into heavy weed. You'll get it out of that and it'll go into another weed bed. But if you've got that lead still attached, you're definitely gonna land it. So that's how I approach fishing in heavy weed. The best thing for you to do is just go and do it. Get the experience. The information it's all in front of you. It's how you approach it. I'm not saying what I do is what's going to be right for everybody. Everybody's got the different outtakes on things, on how they approach things. This is how I approach it. So I'll recap a little bit. You need to be feeling the lead down if possible, just to gain. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get a drop. So, or you're not going to feel for a drop, I should say. But you need to know roughly on how high that weed is coming up off the bottom. Your baiting approach, your rigs, normally there's 2, the chod rig or the Ronnie rig, fished on helicopter setups. Obviously dropping the lead, which we all know is controversial, and obviously the last one is setting up your setup correctly, i.e. not letting the fish take any line. So that is how I approach fishing in heavy weed. I'm going to do a little piece in the next few weeks. I'm going to go to an extremely weedy water. Hopefully by then I'll have all my new camera equipment, so you'll be able to see a little bit more than what I'm doing at the moment. As I said, this is sufficient for just at home, but on the bank I need a little bit, something a bit more techy, and I'm getting that way. I'm not exactly a technical head with regards to equipment, but I thought, hey ho, why not? I'll just go out and buy a half decent camera. But I hope that helps. I've had to write little bits and pieces down because I've had quite a few questions on different things, but I'm trying to sort of roll it up into one. And this is just off the cusp, so forgive me if I have missed anything, but I hope that helps a little bit in fishing in weed.